Hello everybody, I'm your host, the Dr. Bob Lee, and you're watching Open, the only live interactive program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to your TV set. Stay connected to us through social media at Bronxnet TV. And leading off today's show, well, let me see, on November the 30th, University Neighborhood Housing Program, they're going to bring you a Tenant Housing Resource Fair. And joining us with the details, we have Jessica Belinda, and she's a Legal Aid Society, from the Legal Aid Society, as well as Jamelia Abramson and Vanessa Lanier of the University Neighborhood Housing Program. Tell us what's it all about? Give us the mission statement.
So we're hoping to bring resources to the Northwest Bronx, and that's the mission of University Neighborhood Housing Program. So on the 30th, Wednesday at 5:30, we're partnering with over 10 nonprofits to bring housing resources, everything from legal to help freezing your rent, finding assistance if you're struggling making ends meet, and if you're looking for new housing, how to find that.
And how does that work?
Well, you attend the event on the 30th, call to RSVP, the number will come up on the prompter, the TV. Call to RSVP and secure your spot, and then once you attend the event, you can meet with some of the partners, including our attorneys, and you're gonna set up an appointment, either fill out an intake on the spot, and deal with the housing issues that you may be struggling at the moment.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you how, how is this gonna look when we come there and, and check it out, for people who want to come. But first, tell us, who are these 10 nonprofits that you're dealing with that are gonna come together?
Yeah. So we're partnering with Legal Aid Society. We're partnering with Ford and Bedford Housing Corporation. We're partnering with Homebase to bring the resources that they all have on site. We're partnering with the Northwest Bronx and Clergy Coalition. We're partnering with West Bronx Housing. We're partnering with our elective officials, so Gustavo Rivera will also be in attendance. And we're partnering with our financial coach, so the financial clinic will be there, providing credit reports and assisting with budgeting to make sure that people don't fall behind on their rent.
There you go. Now, how does it work now? This is a organization that helps with rent. What's it all about? Tell us more.
Well, the Legal Aid Society is one of the many groups that's going to be at the fair, and we provide assistance with legal issues. So if you're facing eviction, we defend tenants in eviction proceedings. We're also now able to represent tenants in affirmative actions to get repairs or to hold their landlords accountable if the landlords are not complying with the rent stabilization law. But some of the other folks that are there are coming to talk about some of the subsidies that they assist tenants with.
Sure, I was going to ask you about the low interest loans. Where do they come from?
So I'm not sure which loans we're thinking of, but I know, for example, with a lot of our clients, there's a whole sort of process that we need to go to make them sort of have stability in their housing, and especially if they're facing a non-payment case or an eviction proceeding. So we need them to have the future ability to pay their rent, which may mean trying to hook them up with a subsidy like FEPS or City FEPS or a LINK program. There's a lot of different
One-shot deal.
One-shot deal.
So those are to pay arrears. But you need to have the future ability to pay your rent, because if your apartment is too expensive for you, I mean, we can look at the legal issue to see whether the rent is set at the proper level. But if that's the right rent, then the question is, how can we make the apartment affordable for you? And that's where subsidies sometimes will come in, or roommates, or there's different ways that New Yorkers make ends meet to keep their housing. But then you also are looking at ways to pay rent arrears that may have accrued because times are hard and money is short and you've fallen behind for whatever reason. And there are both charities and subsidy or rent arrears grants that are available through HRA that we help people access. And I know that some of the folks that are going to be there from Homebase will talk to tenants a lot about that kind of thing, because they are one of the entry points for folks trying to pay off their rent arrears and keep their housing.
Great. Vanessa, what part do you play?
So I can speak a little bit to the need in the Bronx. I think we all know about the affordability crisis in New York City and how New Yorkers having to find creative things, like Jessica mentioned, about doubling up or finding some other alternatives. And so I think the reason why it's being held in the Bronx is because even though we have the lowest asking rents in the city, we have severe rent burden here, so it makes it the least affordable borough to the people it actually houses,
Sure.
because most of our residents are severely rent burdened, where they're paying over 50% of their rent and or 50% of their income in rent.
Is there a function that's going to take place where people can get the opportunity to experience all of these things that you just spoke about under one roof?
Yeah, so on the 30th, you can come in, talk to all the organizations that are on site. You can sit in for 2 workshops that are going to be held, because in addition to setting up the one-on-one appointments for the immediate needs, we want you to we want residents to think long term. How can I preserve the housing that I currently have, and how can this be achievable? How can I stretch my disposable income so I'm not in a pickle next few months, and the next year I'm in a more financial stable position. So we want them to talk to all the groups that are on site and think, like, what else could I be struggling next year? Is it my income that may be reduced, or is it my rent that's going to be too high and it's no longer going to be affordable? Or am I looking for a new apartment and my credit is not at the level it should be? Sure. Or should I be saving for my next deposit if I'm looking to moving out of where I'm currently at?
One thing I would add also is that because the apartment vacancies are relatively low, and a lot of our tenants in the Bronx have programs that they're working with, whether it's Section 8 or FEPS or whatever, they are finding it really hard to move because a lot of landlords are not willing to accept it, even though that is illegal. And so one of the things that we would like to encourage tenants to do is really hold their landlords accountable for keeping the apartments in good repair. Because a lot of folks get so frustrated living in apartments with mold and roaches and rats and things like that, that they want to move, but and they give up on an apartment that is affordable because they think, oh, I'm going to find something else. And often they cannot find something else easily. And so we'd like to help tenants maintain the quality of the apartments that they have.
Jessica, what's the main complaint? You work for the Legal Aid Society. What's the main complaint that people call your office about?
I mean, I think overwhelmingly the problem is that people just can't afford their apartments. And so that's a huge problem. And that is the vast majority of cases in housing court are non-payment cases because the rents are either too high or the incomes are too low, or there's sort of a failure to meet at that point. But in terms of tenant concerns about their own housing as opposed to their ability to pay the rent, I mean, we have just a lot of conditions problems in the Bronx. It's a fairly old housing stock, and there's a lot of leaks, a lot of mold, a lot of vermin. So we've got, mice, rats, roaches.
And all those things are very dangerous, health-wise.
Right, and they exacerbate existing health conditions. We have very high asthma levels and other problems in the Bronx that are somewhat based on the conditions that people are exposed to in their apartments. And so all of those are things that, if we're going to stay in the Bronx and we're going to live here and keep these apartments, we need to improve the conditions.
Couple of tips to our tenants.
In terms of what they should do?
Sure.
Well, I think to preserve your housing, you need to figure out a way to make it affordable for you. So that has to be a top priority. But then in terms of conditions, you definitely need to create a paper trail of the requests that you've made to your landlord, the conditions that you have, the notice that you've provided, and you should ideally call 311 and get a record of it so that if you ever are taken to court, you can show the judge, look, the value of my apartment is reduced because of all of these conditions. I may owe some rent, but I shouldn't have to pay that full amount because of the conditions in my apartment.
Sure. All right, we're going to have to wrap up. Any last words from you guys?
Attend the 30th and get all the resources that you think you may need now, or a neighbor, spread the word.
Where's it at on the 30th?
It's at University Neighborhood Housing Program, so 2751 Grand Concourse, at the corner of East 196th Street.
And Vanessa, where can we go for more information?
You can go to www.unhp.org.
There you go. Give them a big hand, everybody. Thank you guys so much for enlightening us. Very good. All right. Got to take a quick break right here, but stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Open next.